Black man gave up his first-class seat for pregnant woman, then she did this. You won't believe what happened on that flight. A kind-hearted man gave up his first-class seat for a pregnant woman thinking he was doing the right thing. But what she did next shocked everyone on board, and it changed his life forever. It all started on a routine Wednesday afternoon. The airport was bustling with travelers, business people rushing to meetings, families heading off on vacation, and solo flyers buried in their phones. Among them was Marcus Johnson, a 34-year-old software engineer from Atlanta. Marcus had worked hard to earn this trip. After months of grueling deadlines at work, he finally decided to treat himself to something special, a first-class ticket to New York City for a weekend getaway. Marcus wasn't used to luxury travel. He grew up in a modest household, raised by a single mom who taught him the value of kindness and humility. So when he stepped onto the plane and saw the plush leather seats, the complimentary champagne, and the warm smiles of the flight attendants, he felt like he'd hit the jackpot. But as fate would have it, Marcus's decision to give up that coveted seat would lead to one of the most unforgettable experiences of his life, and not in the way you might expect. As passengers boarded, Marcus noticed her, a young woman waddling down the aisle, visibly struggling under the weight of her pregnancy. She clutched her lower back, beads of sweat forming on her forehead. Her name tag read Tiffany, and she looked completely exhausted. That's when Marcus made a split-second decision that would set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. Marcus didn't think twice. He unbuckled his seatbelt, stood up, and approached Tiffany as she hesitated near the economy class section. "Ma'am," he said gently, "you can take my seat. I'll move to the back." Tiffany looked at him, surprised. "Are you sure? That's first class." "I'm positive," Marcus replied with a reassuring smile. "You need it more than I do." Grateful but clearly overwhelmed, Tiffany accepted his offer. As they swapped seats, Marcus couldn't help but notice how relieved she seemed. She settled into the wide, comfortable chair, sighing deeply as if a huge burden had been lifted, at least physically. Little did Marcus know, this simple act of kindness was about to spiral into something far more complicated. The flight took off smoothly, and Marcus found himself crammed into a middle seat in economy, sandwiched between a snoring man and a teenager glued to their phone. It wasn't ideal, but Marcus didn't mind. He told himself it was worth it to make someone else's day a little easier. About an hour into the flight, the captain announced turbulence ahead. The plane jolted slightly, causing nervous murmurs among the passengers. Marcus gripped the armrest tightly, silently wishing he were back in first class where the ride felt smoother. But then, over the intercom, came an announcement that sent chills down everyone's spines. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a medical emergency on board. If there is a doctor or anyone with medical training, please press your call button immediately." Marcus's heart sank. He turned instinctively toward the front of the plane where Tiffany sat. A flight attendant rushed past him, holding a first aid kit. Moments later, another announcement confirmed what Marcus feared most. The pregnant woman, Tiffany, was in distress. Panic spread through the cabin like wildfire. People whispered nervously, some clutching their phones, others staring anxiously at the closed curtain separating first class from the rest of the plane. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was his fault. If he hadn't given up his seat, maybe she wouldn't be in trouble right now. Or worse, what if something happened to her baby? Minutes ticked by agonizingly slowly. Finally, the flight attendants emerged, looking pale but composed. They assured everyone that Tiffany was stable, though they wouldn't say much else. Then, just as the tension began to ease, something strange happened. A man sitting near Marcus leaned over and muttered, "That woman, she's hiding something." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" The man glanced around cautiously before continuing. "I overheard her talking on the phone before we boarded. She mentioned something about the package and making sure it gets delivered. At the time, I thought nothing of it, but now." He trailed off, leaving Marcus with a sinking feeling in his stomach. Was Tiffany really just a regular pregnant traveler, or was there more to her story? Determined to get answers, Marcus waited until the turbulence subsided and made his way to the front of the plane under the pretense of using the restroom. As he passed the first-class section, he caught a glimpse of Tiffany through the gap in the curtains. She was awake now, speaking quietly with one of the flight attendants. Her expression was calm, almost eerily so, given the circumstances. But it was what Marcus saw next that stopped him dead in his tracks. Clutched in Tiffany's hand was a small black duffel bag, the kind you'd use for carry-on luggage. Except this one looked different. It was worn, with frayed edges, and something about the way she held it made Marcus uneasy. Suddenly, Tiffany glanced up, and their eyes met. For a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. Marcus quickly looked away, pretending to adjust his shirt collar. But as he returned to his seat, his mind raced with questions. Who was this woman? What was in that bag? And why did he feel like he'd just stepped into something dangerous? Little did Marcus know, the answers would come sooner and be far more shocking than he ever imagined. Back in his seat, Marcus tried to shake off the unease creeping over him. He told himself he was overthinking things, that Tiffany was just a tired pregnant woman who needed help. But deep down, he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. As the flight continued, Marcus noticed subtle changes in the atmosphere. The flight attendants seemed unusually tense, whispering urgently to each other whenever they thought no one was looking. Passengers exchanged wary glances, sensing that something bigger was going on behind the scenes. And then, without warning, the plane hit another patch of turbulence, this time much worse than before. The aircraft shuddered violently, sending drinks flying and passengers gripping their armrests for dear life. Amid the chaos, Marcus heard a commotion coming from the first-class section. People were shouting, and there was a loud thud, like something or someone had fallen. Heart pounding, Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and made his way toward the sound. When he reached the curtain separating economy from first class, what he saw stopped him cold. Tiffany was standing in the aisle, her face pale but determined. In one hand, she clutched the black duffel bag tightly against her chest. In the other, she held a gun. The cabin fell silent. No one dared to move, as Tiffany scanned the faces around her, her eyes narrowing with resolve. "Nobody follow me," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the stunned silence like a knife. "This doesn't have to get messy." Marcus's breath caught in his throat. His mind raced. How had he missed this? Was Tiffany involved in some kind of crime? And if so, why had she brought danger onto the plane? Before anyone could react, Tiffany turned and headed toward the cockpit. She knocked sharply on the door, demanding entry. The pilots hesitated, but after a tense moment, the door opened just wide enough for her to slip inside. Panic erupted in the cabin. Passengers began murmuring frantically, some pulling out their phones to call loved ones, others praying aloud. Marcus felt paralyzed, unable to process what was happening. One thing was clear: Tiffany wasn't just a random traveler. She had a plan, and whatever was in that duffel bag was central to it. Minutes dragged by like hours. Finally, the intercom crackled to life. Everyone froze as Tiffany's voice filled the cabin. "Listen carefully," she began, her tone calm but commanding. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here because I have no choice. What's in this bag? It's worth millions, and people will do anything to get it, including kill me and my baby." A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Marcus's stomach churned. Who was chasing her, and why would anyone target a pregnant woman? "I didn't want to involve any of you," Tiffany continued, her voice trembling slightly now. "But they found me. They're waiting for us at JFK. If I don't deliver this package, none of us are walking away from this alive." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Marcus realized with growing dread that they weren't just passengers anymore, they were hostages. Whatever Tiffany was carrying, it had put everyone on that plane in mortal danger. And then came the twist that turned everything upside down. From the cockpit, a male voice interrupted Tiffany. It was the co-pilot, speaking urgently. "We've got company," he said. "Two fighter jets just appeared on our radar. They're ordering us to land immediately." Tiffany swore under her breath, clutching the duffel bag even tighter. "It's them," she muttered. "They're here." Marcus's blood ran cold. Fighter jets? Who exactly was after Tiffany? And how far were they willing to go to get what she was carrying? As the plane descended rapidly, the tension in the cabin became unbearable. Passengers braced themselves, unsure whether they'd survive the landing or what awaited them once they touched down. What happened next shocked everyone and left Marcus questioning everything he thought he knew about kindness, trust, and survival. The plane touched down hard on the runway, jolting everyone inside. For a moment there was silence, just the sound of engines winding down and passengers holding their breath. Then chaos erupted. Tiffany stormed out of the cockpit, still clutching the duffel bag, like her life depended on it. Her eyes darted around the cabin, as if searching for an escape route. But before she could make a move, the cockpit door swung open again, and two men stepped out, not pilots, but armed agents in tactical gear. "Hands where we can see them," one of them barked, his voice sharp and commanding. Passengers screamed, scrambling to get as far away from the scene as possible. Marcus froze in place, his heart hammering in his chest. He watched as Tiffany slowly raised her hands, the gun dangling loosely from her fingers. "It's not what you think," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. "You don't understand, they're going to kill me." The agents didn't respond. They moved quickly, disarming her and securing the duffel bag. One of them grabbed Tiffany by the arm and led her toward the exit. As they passed Marcus, Tiffany locked eyes with him. There was no anger in her gaze, only fear and something else, gratitude. Before he could process what that meant, another agent addressed the terrified passengers. "Stay seated, we'll escort you off the plane shortly." But Marcus couldn't sit still. His mind raced with questions. Who were these agents? Were they the good guys, or part of whatever dangerous game Tiffany had been caught up in? And most importantly, what was in that duffel bag? As the remaining passengers were finally allowed to disembark, Marcus lingered near the gate, hoping to catch a glimpse of Tiffany or overhear any clues about what had just happened. Instead, he saw something that made his blood run cold. On a nearby TV screen displaying live news coverage, a headline flashed across the bottom: "Breaking news: FBI raids luxury jet after high-stakes chase involving missing corporate secrets." Corporate secrets. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Had Tiffany stolen something valuable, or was she being used as a pawn in a much larger conspiracy? Just as he turned to leave, a man in a dark suit approached him. "Are you Marcus Johnson?" he asked, his tone calm but probing. Marcus hesitated. "Yeah, why?" "We need to talk," the man said simply, gesturing toward a private lounge area. "It's about Tiffany and the choice you made today." Marcus followed reluctantly, his mind spinning with possibilities. What did this stranger know, and how did Marcus fit into all of this? As the door closed behind them, cutting him off from the rest of the world, Marcus realized one thing for certain: giving up his first-class seat had been the start of something far bigger and far more dangerous than he ever could have imagined. What would you have done if you were in Marcus's shoes? Would you have given up your seat knowing what might happen next? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts. If you're craving more jaw-dropping true crime stories like this one, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, check out our playlist of other shocking tales from the skies. You won't believe what some people have survived. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes, a single act of kindness can lead to consequences no one could have predicted. Until next time, stay curious.